Hello, this is Jane. For the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 16 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And I'm going to start with the big headline here, which reads The Big Smoke. Wildfire haze prompts air quality warnings as city bathed in smog. And there's a huge picture here taken of Toronto, and there's a man in the foreground who's in Lake Ontario. And underneath it, it says wildfire smoke from northern Ontario cast an orange pall over the city, seen from Humber Bay Park West on Wednesday. This article is by Manuela Vega, Dania Yacoub, and Xavier Mesquita. Toronto was blanketed under an eerie orange sky Wednesday as a thick, choking cover of smoke from hundreds of wildfires in northern Ontario pushed the city's air quality to worst in the world, prompting health warnings and event cancellations. Air quality warnings from Environment Canada stretched from Thunder Bay East to Kingston and south to London. Evacuation orders have been issued for several First Nations communities in northwestern Ontario. Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a social media post Wednesday night that his government was in close contact with provincial, municipal, and Indigenous partners and stands ready to provide any additional support as needed. Thousands of people have been forced to evacuate their communities, not knowing if their homes will survive, Carney said, thanking firefighters, first responders, and local leaders for their work. A video widely circulated online showed orange flames engulfing a stalled CN train near Armstrong, about 250 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, with crew members trapped inside before they were evacuated. Smoke plumes stretched south across the border, prompting health warnings in New York State and through the U.S. Northeast and Midwest. In a social media post, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani told residents that air quality has reached unhealthy levels in parts of New York City due to smoke from Canadian wildfires, as the city overtook Toronto for the world's worst air quality Wednesday night. Thousands of visitors were told to evacuate a remote Minnesota wilderness area accessible only by boat due to wildfires burning in the state. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz thanked Premier Doug Ford and our Canadian allies after two groups of American YMCA campers were rescued from the fires near the U.S.-Canada border. Ford replied, "That's what neighbors are for." In Toronto, outdoor events were canceled, including World Cup watch parties at the FIFA Fan Festival, Nathan Phillips Square, and the University of Toronto for Argentina's 2-1 semifinal win over England. The city closed its outdoor pools and children's wading pools. Is this the apocalypse now? What's going on here? Said Pat Keys, a tourist in Toronto from Washington, as he awoke Wednesday and looked out his hotel window. This morning it was like a war zone, he said, adding he was surprised to see conditions change so fast after enjoying sunny blue skies for the past few days. The conditions were described as a, quote, smoky eclipse, unquote, by the Weather Network's Melinda Singh. In a clear atmosphere, shorter wavelengths like blue light get scattered in all directions, making the sky look blue, she explained in a social media video. But during wildfires, when larger particles like pollution, smoke, and ash enter the air, the shorter color wavelengths are filtered out and colors like red and orange come through. When wildfire smoke is present, the filtering is even stronger, and you can get a deep red or even a blood orange sky, Singh said. If the smoke is especially thick, the sun can appear dimmed or even blotted out. By Wednesday evening, Toronto had dropped from first to fifth most polluted major city in the world, according to IQ Air. But Environment Canada warned that air quality would continue to pose a high risk before potentially improving by Friday morning. The weather agency's heat warning for Toronto ended Wednesday evening as the temperature downtown dropped to 24.8 Celsius. The city set a heat record Tuesday when temperatures hit a sweltering 37.3 Celsius, beating a single-day July 14 record of 36.8 Celsius in 1995. Toronto's all-time temperature record of 40.6 Celsius was set over a multiple-day heat wave in July 1936. Temperatures are forecast to slowly continue dropping, with 30 Celsius expected on Thursday, 25 Celsius on Friday, and a chance of rain with 26 Celsius on Saturday. Around 200 wildfires are burning in northwestern Ontario, according to the latest information from the provincial government, prompting the evacuation of communities across the region, including Armstrong, Lac La Croix First Nation, Collins First Nation, White Sand First Nation, Gull Bay First Nation, and Lac des Mille Lacs First Nation. High-risk days like Wednesday are anomalies in Canada, but there is evidence they are becoming more common, said Rebecca Sari, Canada Research Chair in Global Change, Atmosphere and Health, and Associate Professor at the University of Waterloo. We expect them to become less rare, she said. A lot of that is just climate change. Sari said climate change increases the likelihood of wildfires as higher temperatures lead to hotter, drier conditions. Whether these kinds of events become a new normal in the summer depends on whether we reduce emissions that cause pollution and that cause climate change, she said. If we do meet our climate goals, then we can expect to avoid a lot of these risks. While there are acute short-term effects associated with wildfires, there is a bigger public health concern of prolonged or repeated exposure to poor air quality, Sari said. Hao Sen Chung, an organizer with the Toronto Environmental Alliance, said different levels of governments need to come together to fight climate change. The unfortunate reality is that this extreme weather and wildfire smoke is not natural, Chung said. It is man-made. It is a result of decades of burning natural gas, gasoline, coal, burning garbage. If we want to make sure that the number of extreme weather events, of heat days, and wildfire events doesn't increase exponentially, we need to stop burning things for energy, he said. The next article is also from the front page, and it's under the byline of Star investigation. Former Markham official breached rules, city says. Ex-staffer accused of conflict of interest involving developer. And this is by Sheila Wang. The former top Markham planning official, who was allegedly also working as a paid consultant for a developer, breached the city's requirements for declaring conflict of interest, the city of Markham says. An independent investigation into Arvind Prasad's conduct found the former Markham official did not adhere to conflict of interest and disclosure obligations set out in the city's code of conduct for its employees, a city spokesperson confirmed this week. The conclusion came almost a year after the city received a complaint accusing Prasad of collecting payments from a developer with a zoning matter before the council, while Prasad was working as Markham's Commissioner of Development Services. The complaint alleged that Prasad invoiced more than $140,000 for consulting work to a developer between December 2023 and March 2025. During that time, Prasad endorsed a zoning request to allow the same developer to build an industrial complex on agricultural land that includes a farmhouse that has been designated a heritage building. Prasad did not respond to a request for comment on the investigation's finding against him. He has previously denied any wrongdoing through his lawyer. The Markham spokesperson did not provide any additional details of the investigation or the findings, nor would he answer questions about what, if any, actions the city will take against Prasad. The city takes the findings seriously and is reinforcing employee obligations, the spokesperson said in a written statement. He did not elaborate on what steps the city is taking to do that, but emphasized that Markham remains confident in the integrity of its planning and development processes. For the man whose complaint sparked the investigation, the lack of specifics from the city should make taxpayers angry. I think the public should be enraged, complainant Prasanna Balachandran told the Star. The overall integrity of the planning system, or the planning department, and what it does for the city is compromised. He said the findings should be released so the public can determine itself whether there were any irregularities in the city's approval process of the zoning application from the developer who allegedly paid Prasad for consulting work. The city declined to comment further due to ongoing legal and privacy considerations. Before the complaint was made, Prasad had left the Markham job to work as the general manager for planning and economic development with the city of Hamilton. Following a Star report on Markham's investigation about the complaint in May, the city of Hamilton put Prasad on administrative leave and parted ways with him weeks later. In its statement, the city of Markham said a law firm hired to review the handling of the zoning application made by the developer named in the complaint concluded that there were no anomalies with the approval process. Prasad and two other senior officials signed off on a zoning application from Grit Developments in a June 2024 report, which said its proposal was appropriate and represents good planning. At the time Prasad signed that report, the commissioner and his business had allegedly already received more than $60,000 from Grit for the consulting work, according to invoices included in Balachandran's complaint. Prasad and his business would go on to pocket at least another $70,000 from the developer, according to the records shared with the city. Grit Developments has denied any wrongdoing in its previous responses to the Star's questions. The Star cannot independently verify the authenticity of the invoices included in the complaint. And I need to pause here for a moment to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is also from the front page on the byline of Courts. Teen gets maximum youth sentence for murder of Pickering woman, 83. And this is by Jennifer Pagliaro. The boy who killed 83-year-old Eleanor Doney as she was raking leaves in her Pickering front yard has been given the maximum youth sentence for first-degree murder. Superior Court Justice Lisa Wanamaker ruled Wednesday that the 15-year-old, who cannot be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, would receive some credit for the more than 13 months he has been in pre-sentence detention, ordering he spend an additional 5 years in a youth facility receiving intensive programming and counseling. In her ruling, Wanamaker acknowledged the many family and friends who shared victim impact statements about the wife, mother, grandmother, God-fearing Bible study partner, and avid gardener they lost. It would seem that anyone would be lucky to have an Eleanor Doney in their life, the judge said. There is frankly no sentence that will ever help Eleanor's family and friends to overcome their deep sense of loss. She continued, "There is little that I can say to dampen their immense grief at the untimely and violent loss of their loved one. I can say that I have spent time with your words and fully considered the impact that this unimaginable loss has had on all of you." Following his time in the youth facility, the teenager will be released back into the community under supervision for another 4 years. The conditions of that community sentence will be confirmed by the court before his custodial sentence ends. It will include a lifetime weapons ban and a requirement to submit DNA. Crown Attorney Tammy Derry and the boy's defense lawyer Aaron Dan had jointly submitted that the youth, who was 14 at the time he stabbed Doney, should serve the maximum sentence of 10 years, but disagreed on the amount of credit owed, the Crown arguing no credit should be granted and Dan pushing for 12 months to be deducted from the future sentence. On May 29, 2025, the boy approached Doney and stabbed her multiple times on her residential street, then fled, setting off a manhunt that saw neighbors instructed by police to shelter in place. He was arrested later that night at his family home without incident. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in April with an agreed statement of facts submitted in court outlining a fixation with violence and serial killers. On Tuesday, he addressed the court, saying he was deeply sorry for his actions. Bruce Doney wrote to the court that since his wife of 63 years was killed, he has been living a constant nightmare. Forced to move to a long-term care home after the loss of his primary caregiver, he also lost a lifelong companion who would read to him at night as his eyesight failed and bring him his cup of coffee in the morning. They would talk about their dreams, their plans for the day, and anything that was bothering them. "It has been unspeakable how I miss my wife Ellie and look forward to seeing her in heaven," their daughter Judy Kerwin transcribed on his behalf. In her own letter to the Star, which she permitted a reporter to quote from, Kerwin questioned whether justice would be done under youth laws for the woman she told the court was her dearest friend and mentor. "We are failing to fulfill the purpose of the justice system, which is to keep our communities safe and secure. This failure has a tragic consequence, the getting away with murder. My mom's." The 10-year sentence represents the maximum allowed under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, that's YCJA, which spells out that only 6 of those years can be spent in custody. The Crown's office had previously said they would apply to have the boy face an adult sentence, but after a recent Supreme Court of Canada ruling clarified the test prosecutors must meet to be successful, the application was abandoned. To satisfy the court that a young person should be treated as an adult at sentencing, it is up to the prosecutor to show they cannot be held accountable under the YCJA, which assumes youth have diminished moral blameworthiness compared to adults. Wanamaker, in her decision, considered factors of the teen's upbringing, his time in school, and psychological reports submitted to the court following his arrest. The Star has previously reported that the boy had made several concerning comments reported to his school's administrator before bringing a knife to school. He was suspended for 5 days. He murdered Donnie the following day. In the weeks leading up to the murder, the boy described how he had an urge to kill, the agreed statement of facts outlined, and as well as engaging in troubling fascination with serial killers, both real and fictional, online. The judge described areas of concern she considered as part of her decision, including the boy having a lack of insight into the consequences of his actions and at time a dismissive reaction when discussing the events, as well as an ongoing preoccupation with themes of violence. At the same time, the judge said the boy appeared to be amenable to therapy and eager to engage in programming. There is no dispute that this was a horrific crime that forever changed the lives of many people, and I dare say that it has changed the complexion of a quiet Pickering suburb in which it was perpetrated, Wanamaker said. The teen, she said, acted alone, acted with brutality, and acted with planning. She noted his guilty plea, his comments to the court, and his willingness to participate in treatment. She ended her ruling by addressing the boy directly. Perhaps having seen a room full of Mrs. Donnie's loved ones before you, expressing the tragedy that your actions have brought upon them, and the unimaginable pain and grief that you have caused has motivated you to change and not let this terrible circumstance and tragedy define you. And the next article is headlined, Plea in Death of Balcony Surfer. Accused pleads guilty to manslaughter after victim fell from 8th floor unit. And the article is mostly on the inside of the paper, and there's another headline here which reads, Accused pleads guilty in death of man who fell from balcony. Deceased attempted to flee apartment after being threatened by 2 men. And this is by Jacques Gallant. Ryan Williams was a balcony surfer. The 38-year-old man would climb from one balcony to another at his apartment building on Church Street near Shooter Street, as well as at previous residences. He once scaled down the outside of a building, approximately 10 stories, after climbing over a balcony. But on April 24, 2024, Williams lost his grip and fell to his death from his 8th floor unit as he tried to flee his apartment after being threatened by Joshua Pilgrim, an acquaintance, during a physical fight with another man. Pilgrim pleaded guilty to manslaughter on Wednesday, admitting that he knew Williams might try to escape him via the balcony, given his knowledge of Mr. Williams' predilection for balcony surfing, according to an agreed statement of facts. Mr. Pilgrim admits that his unlawful act of threatening Mr. Williams with additional violence was a contributing cause of his death. Crown Attorney Nathaniel Smith is expected to argue that Pilgrim, who has been in jail since his arrest, should receive a 5-year sentence minus standard credit for pre-sentence custody. Defense lawyer Scott Reed will ask for 3 to 4 years. Williams lived at the Church Street apartment with his mother, who was in her bedroom on the day he died. 4 people, 2 women and 2 men, including Pilgrim, the only person charged in Williams's death, showed up looking to get back cases of Ensure nutritional supplement drinks that Williams had stolen from one of the women. Pilgrim was familiar with Williams, who suffered from a drug addiction, as they sometimes used drugs together. Pilgrim was also there that day to get back drugs he believed Williams had taken from him when he slept over a few weeks prior. If Williams had already used the drugs, Pilgrim wanted an amount of money equivalent to their value. A fight ensued in the living room between Williams and the other man in the group over the stolen Ensure. The man punched Williams several times. Meanwhile, the 2 women stood between the entry to the living room and the door to the apartment. While not intentional, they were inadvertently blocking Mr. Williams' exit from the apartment during the confrontation, says the agreed statement of facts. Pilgrim then threatened Williams during the fight, though he can't remember the exact words he used. He admits they were of a threatening nature in which he would use violence against Mr. Williams if Mr. Williams did not pay Mr. Pilgrim the money for the drugs he took from him, says the statement. Uttered while Mr. Williams was engaged in a violent altercation, it caused him to believe that Mr. Pilgrim was about to enter the fray, which caused Williams to panic and try to escape. Williams ran out to his balcony and tried to climb over to another. However, owing to panic and/or a combination of illegal drugs in his system at the time of the incident, he lost his grip and he fell, says the agreed statement. Williams landed on scaffolding on the 2nd floor and died of his injuries. Pilgrim and the others then fled the scene and returned to their tent encampment. He was arrested 2 days later and charged with 2nd-degree murder, which was later downgraded in court to manslaughter. During a preliminary hearing in provincial court where a judge determines if there's sufficient evidence to move the case to trial in Superior Court, Pilgrim had his cellmate at the Toronto South Detention Center call one of the women who had been in Williams's apartment to ensure she testified at the hearing that there had been no physical altercation between Williams and Pilgrim. While that may have been true, Pilgrim admitted on Wednesday that by asking the women to provide specific testimony about his actions, he also committed the offense of attempting to obstruct justice. The Crown and defense disagree on one issue that could be used as an aggravating factor in determining a fit sentence. Smith alleges that Pilgrim swung a bladed weapon at Williams and cut through his hoodie, but didn't make contact with his body. The defense will argue that didn't happen. Superior Court Justice Maureen Forrestal will deliver her decision on that point and on sentencing at a later date. And before I move on to the next article, I would like to remind you once more that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is titled, Ottawa Mom on Attending Trump Anti-Antifa Summit. Global meeting aims to crack down on left-wing groups. And this is by Mark Ramsey. The Trump administration is hosting a high-level global meeting on combating political terrorism in Washington on Thursday, as it tries to rally together allies on its plans to crack down on left-wing movements. But neither the Carney government nor Canada's national security agencies will say whether they have been invited or plan to attend, or share their views on a campaign that some experts have described as politically motivated and that has reportedly prompted reservations about countries that do not view the issue as a significant threat. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is not attending the summit being hosted by her counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because of prior engagements, according to a spokesperson. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandazangare is not making the trip either, his office said. Anand's office did not respond to repeated requests from the Star this week asking whether other Canadian officials would attend the summit. A State Department spokesperson said more than 60 countries had been invited from various regions, including the Western Hemisphere, Europe, and Asia. There's a sign Canada is trying to tread lightly in the face of pressure from the U.S., which Canada relies on deeply for its security, said experts who spoke to the Star. I think they're trying not to say out loud, thanks, but no thanks, given the delicate position we're in, especially with respect to trade, said Barbara Perry, the founding director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism at Ontario Tech University. I would hope that there is absolutely no interest on the part of any element of the Canadian government to participate in this fiasco. The meeting comes as U.S. President Donald Trump's administration seeks to crack down on what it describes as a rising trend of left-wing extremist violence, with officials focusing on Antifa, despite the fact it is not a single organized group. A White House counterterrorism strategy released in May names violent left-wing extremists, including anarchists and anti-fascists, as one of 3 major terror threats, alongside narco-terrorists and transnational gangs, and legacy Islamist terrorists. It cites, as an example, politically motivated killings of Christians and conservatives committed by violent left-wing extremists, including the assassination of Charlie Kirk by a radical who espoused extremes transgender ideologies. A State Department spokesperson recently told the Star part of the work with other countries would include cooperation to prevent the travel of Antifa-aligned violent actors, protect critical infrastructure, and disrupt financial flows that enable such terrorism. Phil Gursky, a former Canadian Security Intelligence Service analyst, said the shift in U.S. priorities appears to be politically motivated. The most remarkable thing was there was nary a mention of the far right. It completely disappeared. And if you look at any other sane, informed, justified threat assessment of political violence / terrorism in the United States, I mean the far right is right up there, Gursky said of the Americans' counter-terrorism strategy. To say that the far left constitutes a significant national security threat in the United States, that is complete bull s based on the data that we've seen, Gursky said. To me, this is one more attempt by the Trump administration to sell this agenda that, there's nothing to see here, folks, from the far right. While it makes sense to send a Canadian official to this meeting to understand what's being discussed, it would not be unusual for Canada to decline the invite because we haven't always operated in lockstep with the U.S., said Stephanie Carvin, a professor at Carleton University and a former national security analyst for the federal government. Based on the messages very publicly signaled out from national security organizations, it's clear to me that we're not viewing this threat in the same way that the United States is presenting it, Carvin said. The next article is titled Liberals Add Senate Advisory Board. Members offer PM recommendations on appointments. And this is by Catherine Morrison. Ottawa. A week after Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his first picks for the Red Chamber, the federal government named almost a dozen people to its independent advisory board for Senate appointments. In 2016, the previous Liberal government created the Independent Advisory Board to provide non-binding recommendations on Senate appointments to the Prime Minister. But the board had become largely dormant under Carney, with most of the seats on it left vacant. On Wednesday, the government announced its plans for the board. The statement said the board will continue to have 3 federal members, including a chair, and 2 additional members from each province or territory where a Senate vacancy is to be filled, the same as it was under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. A news release Wednesday said the board will be chaired by Francois Rolland, who has served as a federal member of the board since 2018. Others named to the board include former Senator Sarabjit Marwah, former mayor of Westmount Christina Smith, and Indigenous leader and retired provincial court judge James Igloliort. Melissa Blake, former mayor of the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo in Alberta, has been on the board since 2018 and will continue as a federal member. Carney named 4 new senators to the upper chamber this month, including his principal secretary, Tom Pitfield, and conservative MP Richard Martel. There are now 97 senators in the upper chamber and 8 vacancies, 1 in Newfoundland and Labrador, 1 in Nova Scotia, 1 in Ontario, and 5 in Quebec. 2 of the Quebec spots will be filled when Pitfield and Martel are sworn in. The board was part of former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's attempt to modernize the Senate. That plan included him naming senators as independents and not as partisan members of a caucus. And the next article is under the byline of Queen's Park. Tories move to scrap hotel billing perk. Ministers and MPPs found to have charged tens of thousands of dollars to taxpayers. And this is by Robert Benzie. Premier Doug Ford's progressive conservatives are scrambling after revelations that ministers and MPPs expensed tens of thousands of dollars on Toronto hotels, even though they represent GTA ridings. Government House Leader Steve Clark wrote to Speaker Donna Skelly on Wednesday to say he would be moving a motion at the all-party committee that oversees the legislature to scrap the special circumstances expense. Clark is urging new Democratic and Liberal members of the Board of Internal Economy to back the Tories' move, which would eliminate a provision that enables local MPPs to book hotel stays in inclement weather or if there are night sittings at the legislature. It comes after Tourism, Culture, and Gaming Minister Stan Cho reimbursed more than $16,000 in Toronto hotel expenses over 3 years, despite living just 6 kilometers from Queen's Park. Cho personally repaid $16,203 immediately after Global News reported it on Tuesday, even though his office said the expenses were allowable under the Special Circumstances Rule. Last December alone, the minister claimed $6,367 in hotel expenses, according to publicly available expense disclosures. NDP leader Merritt Stiles said the Tories have been caught with their pants down by abusing expenses that are supposed to be reserved for emergency accommodation for MPPs who live within 50 kilometers of Queen's Park. MPPs whose ridings are farther away receive living allowances to rent apartments in Toronto. The New Democrats compiled a list of 20 current and former local Tory ministers and MPPs who claimed a total of $121,409 for Toronto accommodation over the past 3 years. They include Associate Small Business Minister Nina Tangri, who represents Mississauga, Streetsville, and billed $18,976 for Toronto hotels over 3 years. Associate Women's Minister Charmaine Williams, whose riding is Brampton Centre, claimed $15,865 in that same period. Tory MPP Hardeep Grewal, that's in Brampton East, spent $27,275 on hotels from 2023 to 2025. So far, only Cho, a successful businessman before entering politics in 2018, has publicly announced he would repay the legislature for the allowable expenses. Although Stiles says she would back any changes to rules, she said the Tories couldn't be trusted not to breach them. Why are the people of Ontario paying for MPPs living in the GTA to stay in luxury downtown Toronto hotels, she said, noting NDP MPPs in the Greater Toronto Area do not claim such expenses. To Ford's MPPs, hard-earned taxpayer dollars are not your personal piggy bank. It's time to come clean. Show us the receipts and pay the money back. Interim Liberal leader John Fraser said it speaks to an, quote, entitlement, unquote, in the 3-term PC government, recalling the $28.9 million private jet Ford purchased before selling it after a public outcry. Liberal MPP Stephanie Bowman from Don Valley West said the Grits will support ending this practice of GTA members billing for hotels in exceptional circumstances. But the problem was not the provision, it was that government members may have abused it. Eliminating it without accountability does not resolve this matter. It buries it, said Bowman. Green leader Mike Schreiner said Doug Ford and his MPPs are out of control when it comes to spending our money on their personal private jets and hotels. But instead of owning up to their bad behavior, Ford's solution is to remove the spending category altogether, said Schreiner. According to the existing rules, a member whose principal residence is closer than 50 kilometers from Queen's Park may be reimbursed for actual costs of accommodation in Toronto if the costs are incurred due to special or unusual circumstances while on business as a member of the Legislative Assembly. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, meanwhile, said the Tories must rein in government spending. Ford needs to make smarter choices by exercising some restraint with taxpayer money, said CTF Ontario Director Noah Jarvis, noting the Tories overshot last year's budget plan by nearly $4 billion. Before I read the next article, I just need to remind you once more, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is titled, Woman Kept Parents' Bodies Hidden. Daughter, now dead, couldn't bear to be separated from them, court told. This is by Jacques Gallant. After having a couple glasses of wine, Lorraine Wiseman sat down and composed a letter to police about the bodies hidden in her house. Dear officers, she wrote in May 2025, I want to be very clear that I have not, never did, nor ever would hurt my mom and dad. They both died of natural means. Neither wanted to be buried. I treated them with utmost respect. The police has shown up at the Scarborough home that Wiseman shared with her parents, Neil and Ruby, after family in Newfoundland asked them to conduct a wellness check, given that no one had seen or heard from the elderly couple in years. It was while the officers spoke with neighbors that Wiseman wrote the note. When they then came back and entered the home, they made a grisly discovery. Ruby's body in a storage bin in the den, and Neil's body in a freezer in the basement. Their daughter and only child pleaded guilty this year to 2 counts of indignity to a dead body. Court heard that the couple both died in their 90s, but Lorraine, 57, couldn't bring herself to be separated from them after having lived with them her whole life. While Lorraine's note suggested they died of natural causes, a pathologist couldn't determine a cause of death. She told no one of her parents' deaths. While Ruby died in August 2022 and Neil in December 2023, their pensions continued to be deposited into a joint bank account, and Lorraine spent that money right up until her arrest, according to an agreed statement of facts presented at her guilty plea. Lorraine, who worked for 30 years as an educational assistant with the Toronto District School Board until the COVID-19 pandemic, was supposed to face a sentencing hearing on Wednesday, but the charges against her were stayed last month after the court was informed she had died. No cause of death was given. Neighbors were none the wiser, it would seem. Wiseman maintained regular communications with them. They assisted her weekly with obtaining groceries as she did not drive, says the agreed statement. When they inquired about her parents, she would tell them that her parents were doing well. One neighbor even showed up at the house 2 months before Lorraine's arrest with a cake for Neil's birthday. Following her arrest, Lorraine told detectives she had panicked when her mother died on the couch in the den in 2022. She didn't call 911. She wanted to keep her mother close to her, says the agreed statement of facts. She wrapped Ruby in a blanket and, with her father's help, placed her mother's body in a Rubbermaid bin and snapped the lid shut. The following year, when her father died at the kitchen table on Christmas, Lorraine dragged his body downstairs into the basement and placed him in a chest freezer. She advised the detectives that again she panicked and wanted to keep him at home, as her parents are the only people she has, says the statement of facts. When the police showed up at the home to conduct the wellness check in May 2025, Lorraine told them her parents were at a center, and then said they were out with her brother, Robert. She said they wouldn't be back until the evening. After speaking with the neighbors, and after Lorraine wrote her note, the officers returned to the home and she let them inside. She initially tried closing the door to the den and said no when an officer tried to search it. When a second officer went into the den, he asked to see inside of a bin. Lorraine opened it slightly and said it was just dirt, according to the agreement statement of facts. Upon closer inspection by both officers, they determined it was a body in a state of advanced decomposition. A further search of the house led to the discovery of Neil Wiseman's body in the basement freezer. Ms. Wiseman was aware that her parents would not have wanted their remains kept in the house after their passing, says the agreed statement. The next article is titled, Canadians Trust China More Than the U.S., poll says. This is by Dylan Robinson. Ottawa. As U.S. President Donald Trump's administration continues to erode allies' trust, a new poll suggests the number of Canadians who hold a favorable view of China now outnumbers those who say the same of the United States. Recent polling by the Pew Research Center found Trump receiving mostly negative ratings from countries around the world. On Wednesday, the agency released new polling that shows 2 in 5 Canadian respondents held a favorable view of China, while just 1 in 3 said the same about the U.S. Pew polled 1,020 Canadians by phone between mid-February and mid-April, not long after Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing in January. A similar Pew poll in 2025 reported the number of Canadians expressing approval of China was roughly equal to the number saying they approve of the United States. A 2023 Pew poll said China was viewed positively by just 14% of Canadians, while 57% reported positive views of the U.S. Trump is pursuing a trade war with Canada and has repeatedly spoken of annexing the country. Earlier this month, his administration delayed the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge connecting Ontario to Michigan, a bridge Canada paid to build. Only 35% of Canadians told Pew they would trust Chinese President Xi Jinping to do the right thing. However, that is nearly doubled the 20% who said the same of Trump. Pew also has tracked a steep drop in the percentage of Canadians who say the U.S. government respects personal freedoms, from 60% in 2021 to just 34% in 2026. The Canadian polling was conducted through Langer Research Associates and involved random digit dialing with demographic weighting, resulting in a margin error of 3.5%. And then next article is under the byline Immigration Invitations Paused for Parent and Grandparent Sponsorship. Ottawa Planning 15,000 Permanent Residence Approvals. And this is by Nicholas Keong. Ottawa will pause new invitations for Canadians to apply for permanent residence for parents and grandparents until at least the end of this year. In a notice posted on its website Wednesday, the Immigration Department said it will keep processing applications that are already in the system, and it plans to approve as many as 15,000 people for permanent residence under the Parents-Grandparents Sponsorship Program. We don't want there to be too much more so that the wait time becomes unreasonable, said a senior immigration official overseeing the resettlement, family, and humanitarian programs. This pause is to ensure we stay within what is a more reasonable wait time for clients. Canadians who want to bring their parents or grandparents to the country for good must enter a pool to express their interest to do so. A candidate can only submit an application if they are picked in an annual lottery and invited to apply. However, since the pandemic, the department has closed the pool. Currently, 45,400 interested people are in the queue for a draw. According to the senior official who spoke on background, there were applications for about 60,500 people in the system under the program as of the beginning of the year, and the wait time is currently 33 months. At this time, we're just focused on processing the applications we have on hand, said the official. We're just aligning intake with the available space to ensure a well-managed process. Ideally, she added, the department would like to bring down the application processing time to as close to 1 year as possible. The official would not speculate on any redesign of the Parents-Grandparents program and what would happen to those people who are currently in the pool. This announcement is just about ensuring intake is calibrated to our levels planned, she noted. There are no plans, no announcements, No program redesigned with regards to the expression of the interest pool. In the meantime, said the official, the department has made the so-called, quote, super visa, unquote, a temporary visa that allows visiting parents and grandparents multiple entries and to stay up to 5 years at a time, more accessible. I just have time for one more quick one. 2 killed in crash on Highway 401 in Mississauga, and that is by Dania Yakub. 2 people are dead following a massive crash on Highway 401 in Mississauga that critically injured 3 others and caused a traffic backup on the major artery during morning rush hour. The OPP said that at about 9:15 a.m., a collision near Dixie Road caused a shutdown on the Highway 401 eastbound express lanes and from Highway 410 southbound to the 401. The OPP said just before 9 a.m., 2 passenger vehicles were involved in a rear-end collision as traffic was slowing down. Peel paramedics responded to the collision after 9 a.m. and said there were 5 patients in total. 3 were taken to trauma center in Toronto, including one who was airlifted. Paramedics said they can't comment on the other 2 patients. The OPP later confirmed that 2 passengers from Cambridge, Ontario were pronounced dead at the scene. That included an 80-year-old man and a 53-year-old woman, both occupants of the vehicle that was struck from behind. Traffic camera footage from Ontario 511 in the morning showed an orange helicopter on the highway, fire trucks, and stalled traffic. The highway reopened at just before 4 p.m., an OPP press release said Wednesday afternoon. And I will finish with, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 16 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.